Well, there's no question. The crowd here is like none other in college basketball, and I think what makes it so unique, a couple of factors. Number one, you have that tradition that's been going on for years. This is nothing now that you're seeing happen overnight. This has evolved over the years. Number two, you're finding an arena that's small and compact, so you have to play, at least as an opposing team, you have to play with students and with fans literally on top of you, and that's pretty unique as well. I think there are very few arenas that have that type of aura. And I think the fact that you're looking at banners of a national championship, you've got a couple of great players that have played that are going on now in the NBA, and there's a lot of tradition here, and that makes it, for I think, an awfully tough place to play, and it also charges your players up. Your players are always ready to play. The fans are always standing. They're always standing for the games, and they're very unique fans here. I think the fans here work very hard off the floor in terms of studying, and then when they get to the games, they're really prepared to let it loose, and I think that makes for a very special crowd.
Ben was a person I've had my eye on for a while in the coaching community. He is one of the bright stars, and he's not up-and-coming star. He's one of the bright stars. But without the renovation of Harmon, I'm not sure that he would have as strong as interest as he did. But with a great university, he loves the Bay Area, and then to say to him, we're here going to be able to open up a brand new facility here on campus, it had a lot to do with hiring of Ben Braun, and you can see what he has done with our program in a short period of time.
Harmon seemed to be unique because the fans are right down on the floor. You know, students across from the benches are, right next to the action, and it just seems to surround the court, and it just gave a feeling of kind of an intimate feeling that those people there were for you and hostile towards your opponents, and you throw in a straw hat band marching in during warm-ups. A bunch of crazy guys in hats, really loud, get you fired up, and I would imagine can be a little intimidating to the opponents. So I just think it had that aura to it, that flavor that set it apart from other places.
Russ Critchfield was a very talented basketball player, a guy that when you looked at him, you're watching him and you're saying, he cannot be that good. He's sort of a scrawny 6'1", 6-foot guard. I don't see why everybody's talking about this guy until the game started and you watched Russ play, and he had that knack of knowing how to score, yet being able to distribute the ball, and he just had a sense and an ability about him that was God-given for a guy that didn't have great physical skills. I mean, he was not somebody who was truly gifted as a basketball player, yet was very difficult to guard. And I always admired Russ in the way he played, and he just did so many good things for California in an era where California didn't move on to go to a lot of tournaments, but yet Russ was the bright, shining star of his particular years.
I remember one time Pete stopping practice and saying, "Are you guys out for the boxing team, or are you out for basketball here?" And we kind of looked at each other. We didn't realize, just how brutal it evidently was getting inside, but it was that kind of competitiveness every day in practice. They were the most competitive people I've ever seen. We would have our preseason 3-on-3 pickup games in Harmon, and I mean, more than once they'd end up in a fist fight with guys that were absolute best friends, fraternity brothers. And Pete knew that. And Pete and Rennie didn't necessarily like guys fighting, but they loved competitive guys, and this was easily the most competitive bunch of guys. And then I remember the day that Darryl Imhoff became Darryl Imhoff. And, he was a guy who came out of nowhere, hadn't even started on his high school team, was not recommended, and I'm sure the story has been told many times about the phone call to Pete from an aunt who was looking for someone in housing who could get a longer bed, and her nephew was sleeping with this orange crate at the end of his bed, and suddenly Pete perked up and asked, how big is this guy? She said 6'10". Well, in practice one day, if I'm not mistaken, it was Bob Dalton who drove baseline and was going to shoot a layup, and out of nowhere came the big left-hander, Imhoff, and Darryl went up and pinned the ball on the backboard. And we hadn't seen that too often. Everything stopped dead in practice. And Pete said something to the effect of, "Darryl, can you do that again?" He said, "Sure." So Dalton is a real competitor, and he's not going to allow himself to be embarrassed a second time. So Bob went to the basket, but instead of shooting it on the strong side, he dipped under to spin the ball back on the opposite side. Darryl pinned it on that side too. And all of a sudden it became apparent to me I was not going to be the starting center, but Darryl Imhoff was someone special. That memory, not so much the event, but the day that Darryl Imhoff became Darryl Imhoff was one of the biggest changes, I think, in the history of Cal basketball.
Harmon was a place that when you stepped on that floor as a Cal Bear, the adrenaline was up, you were ready to play exciting. If you were an opposing player, there had to be some fear that went through your heart, because the fans right down on the edge of the floor, the straw hat band yelling, the alumni on the end of the court really harassing the opposing players, and I'm sure the officials felt the heat of Harmon. It was a great place to play, and I have great memories of Harmon.
That game, I remember, and anybody who wasn't excited watching Kevin Johnson or Jason Kidd doesn't know anything about basketball. And watching those two young men play, it was a thrill because they were outstanding. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. I belonged to the Oakland Athletic Club, and I used to play racquetball. I had a hip operation, and a buddy of mine was Jason Kidd's godfather. He brought him down to Oakland Athletic Club one time, and we have a one bucket down there where you go out and shoot. Well, he was out there and Jason was shooting, so this guy says, "Hoop, come on over here. I want you to meet this guy, Jason Kidd." And I came over and I shook hands with him, and he said, "Oh, you played at Cal?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "But I can't talk to you about basketball. It's a violation of NCAA rules. But I'll tell you what I'll do, Jason. I'll play you a game of one-on-one, 22 points. And if I beat you, you go to Arizona State. And if you beat me, you go to Cal." And he says, "You're a funny man."